Well, hello there. Welcome back to Thomas Frank Explains. In this video, I'm going to show you how to build a simple yet complete life organization system inside of Notion using the PARA method, which stands for Projects, Areas, Resources, and Archive. Now, PARA was created by my friend Tiago Forte as part of his Building a Second Brain course and also book of the same name. And in my opinion, it's the best general system, at least that I've found, for organizing everything that comes into your digital life, be it tasks or notes or projects, or even just articles that you clip from the web and want to save for later. So in this video, we're going to go from a completely blank page inside of Notion to building a complete PARA system that has tasks and notes built in, along with sections for all of our PARA staples: projects, areas, resources, and a useful archive page for getting rid of stuff that we don't want to see anymore in our main sections. Now, as always, I've got the table of contents right there and below, so you can skip around this video and reference sections as needed. And before we get into the tutorial, I've got two bits of housekeeping. First and foremost, you know your boy, I've got a free template version of this PARA system in the description down below, so you can add that to your workspace, you can pick it apart, you can play with it, or you can just use it if you want to. Secondly, this PARA system is also included in my Ultimate Brain template. And Ultimate Brain is a truly complete second brain and full productivity system for Notion. Not only does it include the PARA system, but it also has a much more robust task manager with recurring tasks and subtasks, and even an optional Getting Things Done or GTD dashboard. It has a super useful My Day dashboard for planning your day. I use it every single day myself. It's got a very powerful note-taking system, a recipe tracker, and tons of other features. So if what you want is just a complete second brain done for you that you can add to Notion with just a click of one button, then you can go over to thomasjfrank.com/brain and check out Ultimate Brain. And you can even use the code LetsGo2023 at checkout to get $50 off of that template. That being said, if you want to get into the nitty-gritty, you want to actually get your hands dirty and build this from scratch, well, that is what the rest of this video is for, and let's get into it. Starting with a bit of a tour of what we're going to build. So here on the screen, I have the PARA dashboard that we're going to build. I have a finished version of it, but as you can see, we have this PARA dashboard, and it gives us a bird's eye view at pretty much the entire PARA system, along with a couple of inboxes. And I think inboxes are very important to have because you don't always want to go into the specific area where something is eventually going to live just to capture something. Sometimes you're on the go and you want to throw a task into your task inbox, or you want to get an idea out of your head and you just chuck it into the note inbox. So we're going to create a couple of inboxes, but then we're going to create our PARA staples. We have a projects area right here. We have a database for both areas and resources, and I will explain why we are merging those into one database later on in the video. But we can see these big areas of our life, and we can also see these resources for more topic-based things that I just kind of want to save information on. And lastly, we have an archive where if we want to archive something or we complete tasks, it's all going to go into this archive area. And then if we go into an area, for example, like business here, we can see that this is sort of a dashboard for this entire area of my life. So I can track projects that are ongoing or done within this area. I can shove reference material or all kinds of stuff that I'm interested in into resources that are within this area. I can even see all of the notes that are related to an area in this area down here. And then likewise, projects are quite flexible in this system because we not only have tasks related to the project, but we also have notes that are related to the project. And this is one of the areas where I think Notion kind of outclasses a lot of other tools, especially if you're cobbling together multiple tools to build this second brain system. A lot of times you got a project going on in your life, you have your tasks over here in one app, and you have the notes and reference material for the project in another app. I would like to have all that stuff in one area, and that's what this PARA setup actually gets us. And this is also implemented in Ultimate Brain as well. So that is a bit of a tour of what we're going to be building. Now, before we actually get into it, I want to give you just a little quick primer on how PARA is structured in general, and then also kind of go over the changes to the PARA model that we need to make, or at least I wanted to make, for making it work better in Notion. So to do that, I'm going to go over to a different tool, which is called Whimsical. And if you want to use this tool, you can find it over at whimsical.com. It's free. It is one of my absolute favorite apps that goes along with Notion. It's a great way to create mind maps and these kind of flow charts here. But here you can see we have our PARA model, and each one of the letters in the PARA acronym is basically a list or a folder, and then everything in your life would go into one of those those 4 folders based on its actionability. So projects are the most actionable thing. When something comes into your life, if it's actionable, you'd probably put it in a project. And then archive is the least actionable. It's actually where irrelevant things go. So let's quickly go through each of these 4 different lists and explain what they are. So projects are for groups of tasks that are linked to a common goal. You basically know what those are. Areas are a little fuzzier. They're areas of your life or spheres of activity to be maintained over time. And I consider areas to be sort of like the buckets of my life. So there's the musician Thomas, there's the personal life that I have, there's the business owner Thomas. Those in my mind are areas. Resources are topics or themes of ongoing interest. So resources could be like Magic the Gathering or computer programming, all kinds of things that I want to learn about. I'm clipping articles from the web, I'm taking notes. They're going to go into resources. Finally, the archive is basically a place to, as I said earlier, safely get stuff out of sight, out of mind, but you're not deleting it. And that's helpful because in case you ever need to go into your archives and reference something that you thought didn't matter anymore, but now does, it's going to be safely there rather than truly deleted. So how do we shift para for Notion? Because Notion is a fundamentally different tool, right? It's database based. We can make as many customized dashboards as we want. We can make linked databases. We basically have a lot more flexibility than we would have with regular old folders in a computer or a traditional tool. So this is the para model as I explained it in my Ultimate Brain video. I'll also link that down below in case you are curious to see every part of the Ultimate Brain template. But this is essentially what we're going to be implementing in this video as well, with the exception of, in this video, we're not going to add goals or milestones. So here we have, as you can see, areas, we have our resources, we have projects, and then we have tasks and notes. And these are sort of like the, granular units of information, be they actionable or non-actionable, that we're going to be feeding into the system. So we do need databases for both. So basically looking at this from a bottom-up perspective, tasks can go into projects, of course, but notes can be part of projects, they can be part of resources, and they can even be part of areas. And this is where my view of para might deviate a little bit from Tiago's, or at least the way that he might implement it for a more traditional tool. Because in Notion, we have tons of flexibility, which means we can do something like this. We can have notes that apply specifically to areas, or they can be put into resources, or they can be put into projects. So this is sort of a look at the overall structure that we're going to be building. And this also gives us a look at the database structure we're going to create inside of Notion to actually make this all work, with the one exception being that areas and resources are going to be one melded database. And I'll kind of explain the reasons for that as we start building the template. So all that out of the way, let's actually start building this para template. And we're going to do that on, again, a completely blank page inside of Notion. So I'm going to call this para dashboard, and I'm going to go ahead and give it an icon. Let's just give it like a book icon, and I'm going to make this a full width page. And we're going to start by actually creating another page inside of this page, and that page I'm going to call databases. So when I create Notion systems, I like to keep my kind of source databases inside of their own page. And that way I have a single destination where I can go if I need to actually change the structure of a database. And then on the dashboard itself, I use linked databases instead of just embedding the parent databases themselves. Now, if that's confusing to you, I think you'll be able to follow it as we go through this tutorial, but I'll also mention I have a full Notion databases course for beginners. I'll have a link to it on the screen right now and down below. It is free. It's here on this YouTube channel. So go through that, or the blog post version if you are unfamiliar with databases or need a refresher. That being said, let's get over to our databases page. I'm going to also make this full width. I'm going to give it an icon, and I think there's actually a database icon. Yep, right there for this page here. So we are going to need several different databases. First, we're going to create, I'll do /database. We're going to create a tasks database. And I'm just going to put 2 in brackets here because the workspace that I'm working in right now may already have a database called tasks. If yours doesn't, then you don't have to do this. I'm just using this name to differentiate for when I'm linking things up later on. So I've got a tasks database, and I'm just going to create all the databases first before I go through and tweak their properties. So I've got tasks. I want to do database once more. So database inline, I'm going to go with notes 2, and then we're going to get our para databases, starting with one called projects. and then one called areas/resources. So the reason that I'm creating a singular database for areas and resources is the fact that when we are processing our tasks or our notes, we don't want to have two different areas on a table view or a list view for both areas and resources. It's much easier and more visually clean, and it's going to work especially much better on smaller screens if you just have a single property you can click into to set the area or the resource. And we're going to be able to visually differentiate the areas and resources by setting some tags on them, and I'll show you that in just a little bit. So at this point, we can start adding the properties that we need to make these databases actually useful, and I'm going to start with tasks here. So within tasks, we don't really need a tags property, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And the first thing I want to add is actually a status property that I'm going to call done. Now you can also use a checkbox property, and in fact, my existing templates right now do use a checkbox property, and that's for technical reasons having to do with automated recurring tasks in the API that I'm not going to get into here, but I will note that if you're not doing any fancy stuff with the API, status property can work very well here, and in fact, you can model it as sort of like a select style thing here, or you can even model it as a checkbox. So I'll leave this one here at select. And the nice thing about the status type property, which I haven't done a video about this yet, is when you create a new row, it automatically gets a default status, which you would not get with something like a select property. So I'm going to go with status here. And then the other property that I want to add is due. So it's going to be a date type property. I'm going to call that due. And that's basically all that I'm going to add for tasks right now. In a little bit, we're going to start relating this tasks database to the projects database, etc. But I want to first also get our notes database figured out here. So with notes, what kind of notes do we want to start capturing in our second brain? Well, there's kind of two different categories. There's the notes that come out of your own head, and then there's the stuff that you clip from around the web. You could use extensions like Save to Notion or the Notion Web Clipper, and those I see as kind of different. So I actually want to separate those from regular just brain dumped kind of notes. So to do that, I'm going to create a URL property. So I'll just search for URL here, and I'm just going to call it URL. And later on, we can create views for any note that does have a URL, so that would be a web clip, and then separated views for any note that doesn't have a URL, which would be something that you kind of took yourself. And obviously you could customize this to your heart's content, but that's what we're going to do here. And I'm also going to create a formula property here. So I'll just type in formula in this property creation area, and I'm going to call this base URL. And this is going to be a formula that actually extracts the kind of base URL from any link, and we're going to be able to use that to group web clips by their base URL later on. So I'm going to create a formula property there, and then I'm going to paste in this formula, which I will have in the description down below, and which I will not try to explain here because it's using some fairly complicated regular expressions that are beyond the scope of this video. What I will mention is if you go over to notionformulaguide.com, I have written complete and comprehensive reference material for Notion formulas, including a very lengthy page explaining regular expressions inside of Notion formulas. So check that out if you want to understand what is going on here, because it's pretty complicated and confusing. But what I can show you at least right now is if I grab, let's just say this paramethod blog post, if I grab the URL for that and I paste it into this URL property here, we're just going to get fortelabs.com as the base URL, which is pretty handy for organizing and grouping our URLs later on. So that's probably good for notes right now. Again, we're going to come back and make relations a bit later, but let's go down to projects. And within projects, we're going to do the exact same thing that we did with tasks. We're going to give it a status type property, and we're going to kind of leave it as is, not started in progress and done, our perfect defaults for our purposes here for projects. And then coming down to areas and resources, the only thing we're going to change here now is first we're going to delete this tags property, and then I'm going to add another status type property, and I'm only using status because it's going to get a default value, and I'm going to call it type. And then within these, I'm actually going to drag this not started to in progress. And I'm only doing that because I don't really want to use these different groupings here. I just kind of want to have everything in one grouping. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of done. And then I'm going to change my options here to area. And I'm going to make that orange because I'm kind of persnickety about my colors. And then this one's going to be resource. And for whatever reason, resources in my head are purple. So we've got orange and purple. I don't know what those colors correspond to. Maybe Halloween. I do like Halloween. So now we have areas, resources, and we can change them at will. And there's always going to be a default value in a new row that we create here. And we can set that default value using default templates, which we will do later. Now we've set up the general properties that we're going to be using to interact with these databases on their own terms, but we want to add one more property that actually helps out the para model, and that is going to be a checkbox property called archive. And I'm just realizing that I don't really want to add that to tasks because we'll just add tasks to the archive when they're completed. But for everything else, let's create a checkbox property, and we're going to call it archive. And then later on, we're just going to create simple filters that say if this is checked, if archive is checked, then we're going to send it off to the archive, and we're going to remove it from everything else. So once again, checkbox, call it archive. And I don't even really need to change the width of these properties here because we're not going to be looking at this databases page very often. So one more time, checkbox, archive. And now we have the property that will allow us to send things to the archive and get it out of our hair. So from this point on, we need to start relating these databases to each other to essentially approximate this model and allow us to, say, add tasks to projects, add notes to resources, areas, or projects, that kind of thing. Also add projects and resources to areas, which this is actually a big difference between my implementation of Para and Tiago's. He sees them as separate lists, which does make sense when you're using a more traditional system. But I actually see areas as basically like, again, life buckets that would contain projects or resources. These are the big areas of your life. These are the reference materials and interests that go into those areas. These are the projects you're working on that relate to those areas. So to set that up, all we need to do is start creating relations. So I'm going to create my first relation here in tasks, and I'm going to find a relation type property. I'm going to relate this to the projects database right here, and I'm just going to call this project. And because a task really only has one project, here I'm going to limit this to one page. And then I also do want to show it on the projects database, and I'm just going to call that tasks. So that way we'll be able to see the tasks that are related to each project on each project. I'll add that relation. And what I've created here is a two-way relation. So essentially I have a project property here in tasks that relates to the project database. And then I also have a reciprocal property called tasks that relates my projects database to tasks. And I can come down to projects and actually see that new reciprocal property. Now, if I were to create this without ticking this little show on projects box here, now I've created a one-way relation. I can set a relation here in tasks, but I will not see it on projects. So we've set up our task and project relation. Now let's go ahead and relate our notes database to both projects and to areas and resources. So I'll go over here once again, make a new property, find that relation option there. And first I'm going to relate to projects. So again, I'll say project here. I'm going to limit that to 1. I'm going to tick to show on projects, and I'm going to call that notes. And I'll go ahead and add my relation there. So now I can relate notes to projects. And likewise, I would like to relate notes to areas and resources. So one more time, relation. And we're going to do areas and resources. And I'm going to just go ahead and call that area/resource. And once again, limit it to one page. And if you really wanted to have a note that was related to 2 different resources or 2 different projects, you could untick this. The only thing this is really going to do is when you set a relation and click it, it will get rid of the one that's already there if there's one that is already there, which is kind of like a quality of life thing. But if you want to have multiple relations, you can absolutely do that. So I'm going to go with notes here as the reciprocal property. Hit add relation. And for now, we are done with notes, though we will have to come back here in just a second to add a rollup property that we'll be able to set up after we're finished with areas and resources. So looking at projects, we have our notes relation, we have our tasks relation, but going back to our model here, projects can be related to areas because an area can contain projects. So to set that up, let's create one more relation inside the projects database. We're going to call that relation. We're going to find the areas and resources database, and I'm going to call this area because personally, I would never put a project inside of a resource. That's not really what resources are for. So I'm just going to stick with area. I will set that one page limit, And I will show this on areas resources. I'll just call this projects. And now we are pretty much done setting up projects. Finally, on areas and resources, because we have one database for both areas and resources, we actually want to create a relation to the same database so that we can say this resource has this root area, or this area has this resource contained within it. So to do that, I'm going to create one more relation right here. And I'm going to actually select the areas and resources database. And you can see this little I button that says this database. So I'm creating a relation within the same database instead of across multiple databases. Both very powerful tools. So I'll click there. I'm going to go and call this resources, and this will have no limit. I'm going to create separate directions, and I'm going to call the reciprocal property root area. So that should create two different properties inside of this database, resources and root area. I'm actually going to come into root area. I'm going to edit it, and I'm going to set that one page limit because I want to make sure each resource only has one area that contains it. Of course, we could have resources that have no area, which is totally fine, but I don't want to have resources that have multiple areas. That's just going to get confusing. Now that we have the root area and resources relation set up, one last thing that I want to do here is come back up to notes, and I want to create a roll-up so I can find the root area of a note that is contained within a resource. And that's kind of a mouthful, so let me actually go back over to the finished example, and I'll kind of show you what I mean. So if I go to, I believe I created a personal life note here. Yes, so Magic the Gathering is one of my favorite hobbies, and this is a resource that is contained within this personal life area. And if I go in here, I can see that I have some web clips here, but I also have some notes, and they are contained within this Magic the Gathering resource. However, that also means definitionally that they are contained within this personal life area. And if I wanted to see those notes inside the personal life dashboard here, like so, I'm going to need a roll-up for that purpose. And the reason for that is if I don't have one, by default, I would only be able to filter this notes view by notes that are related to this area. But if I have a roll-up, then I can also say, or where the root area contains personal life. And that would mean any note inside of any of these resources for which the root area is personal life. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's go ahead and create it. It'll probably make more sense when we actually build it, just like everything else in life does. So back up to notes. We're going to create one more property here. I'm going to choose the rollup property type. I'm going to go with root area. And then we will configure the rollup by selecting our area resource relation and then selecting the root area property. So essentially what we're doing here, we're reaching into our resource relation, and then we're asking, okay, well, within this relation, what is, or within the record that this relation points to, what is the root area there? That's what a rollup does. It reaches through a relation and finds information about the record that the relation points to. So what that's going to do, again, is it's going to let us see our resource notes within our area dashboard, which I think is very, very useful to have. So at this point, we have our database structure created. And going over to our sort of template that we're building this off of, the next things we need to do is we need to create the actual dashboard, and we also want to create the templates inside of each database that create these kinds of dashboards. So this area template, this resource template, like so, and there is also going to be a project template. Do we have a project in here? Yes, I do. Launch new payment system. We've got a project template where we can see tasks and notes. So we're going to start by creating these templates inside of each database. Then we're going to move on to the overall home dashboard right here. And then we'll finish this tutorial up with a little bit of cleanup and some aesthetic tweaks, things like that. So let's go back over to our blank project we're working on here. So once again, we have our blank pair dashboard, we have databases here, and we're going to start creating our templates here. Now we don't need a template for tasks. We don't need a template for notes. Ultimate Brain does have templates, one for task with subtasks here. There's lots of notes templates. There's like a daily journal one. There's like a recipe one, a book review one. We're not going to worry about that here. This video is all about just teaching you how to implement Para itself. So the first one we're going to create is projects. I'm going to go over to this little blue arrow here. I'm going to create a new template. I'm going to call this the project template. And in here, we basically want to create an area where we can dump tasks, we can also dump notes, and then we can get a bit of an overview for our project. So one thing that I love to do when I'm building templates inside of Notion is I'll hit this little arrow key here, and I'm going to use that to create a toggle block. And then I like to call this quick links. And inside of my quick links toggle block, I add a table of contents, which you can create with /TOC. The reason I do this is when you're on your phone, everything in your Notion workspace gets squashed down to one column, which means if you have a long page or if you have a complex dashboard like this, where you have all sorts of different sections and multiple columns, you're going to be scrolling a lot to find what you want to find, unless you have a nice handy little quick links toggle where you can just click this and immediately zoom down to it. And I think if I get it off my screen, I can demonstrate it. Yeah, so that's basically why I add quick links to every one of my templates. Under there, I'm going to do a /callout, and I'm just going to call this project overview. And this would give you kind of a nice little area to write a synopsis of the project, just as a reminder or like a North Star for the project. Also, a cool little tip, if you hit enter and then tab, you get into a new block within your callout, which I like. So I'm going to triple dash to create a horizontal rule, and let's just do add context about your project here. Another cool little thing, aesthetic tweak that I like to make is I go over to color and I set the callout to default background, and that just gives me this nice little outline here. Now for tasks and also for notes, I'm gonna get rid of that block there. We want to create a 2-column layout. So I'm gonna do /2C to get 2 columns, and then I'm gonna do /1 to get a heading 1. I call that tasks. And then I will do /1 over here and call that notes. Now, one cool thing that I haven't gone over in a lot of my tutorials because it's pretty new is now on standard width pages, so where full width is not checked, when we have multiple columns, we actually have these handles over here, if I can find it here, and we can stretch out multi-column layouts to be wider than the normal width of the page, which is pretty useful for stuff like this. Now we have a regular, nice width, single column area for stuff like this, but then when we have multiple columns, we can stretch them out. That's a lot nicer, in my opinion, than having super long lines of text on single columns. And if you look into like UI and readability, there are very good reasons for restricting the width of your columns usually. I'm going to enter down, triple dash one more time. I like to have these horizontal rules underneath my headings. And then we're going to start creating linked databases. So to do that, we don't actually have to type linked database. We could do that and find it all the way down here. But a better way to do it is just type the view type that we want. So I actually want to go with list views. List view has come a long way since my last task management pair tutorial. There's a whole lot of new stuff in there. So I'm going to go with list, and then I'm going to find my tasks view right there. I'm going to hit new empty view because if I just hit this one, it's going to pull the existing tasks table from the parent database and I won't get my nice little list view. So new empty view is perfect. I can leave that blank. It's just going to name it list and everything looks good to me. So I'll click done there. And I know I want to have my due date and my done status showing there. And I also want that done status to actually be displayed as a checkbox. So one cool thing about status type properties, if I go into properties here, is if I go into the property itself, I see this little option, show as, and by default it's a select, but I can also make it a checkbox. Now, when it is a checkbox, you're going to oscillate between to do and complete statuses. There's no way to use the checkbox view type to make something in progress. So just keep that in mind if you are implementing, like, say, a Kanban view or you actually do want to mark something as in progress. But personally, I don't see a reason to do that. I often just have tasks as they are, and then I check them off when they're done, and I'm good to go. So because we want to see only tasks that are related to this project, we want to create a filter here, and we can choose any of these property types. However, I personally am a fan of the old advanced filter setup, so I always use that. You could use simple filters. They work basically identically, but I like advanced filters better. And I want to choose my project relation, and I want to make sure it contains the project template. Now, what's going to happen when I create an actual project and I apply this template to it is that this filter is going to get updated to project contains whatever the project is. So if it's, write the burn the sales song, it's going to get project contains burn the sales, and that is called a self-referential filter. It basically updates itself, and it's very, very useful. And I think that's all we actually need in terms of filters here, because usually I would filter out completed tasks, but in this case, because I want to see like a full bird's eye view of my project, including completed tasks, instead of filtering the completed tasks out to a different view, I'm going to instead go to the grouping option here, and I'm going to group by the done status. And I want to actually hide in progress because I personally am not going to use in progress, but of course you could leave this there if you wanted to. I'm going to go ahead and hide it because again, I'm using the checkbox property. So let's just call this test task for quickness' sake, brevity's sake. When I click this, it's going to immediately go to the done status. So basically, if I'm managing a project, I want to see what's not started, and then I want to see what's done. If it were a bigger project, maybe I would make an additional template where I had like a Kanban style view and I could track tasks through different stages. But for here, we're keeping things simple, and this is totally fine. I'll go ahead and delete this because I don't want it related to the template itself. I'm going to go ahead and hide this database title, and then I'm going to sort this by due, and I'm going to go with due ascending. And that's basically all we need to do for tasks. Likewise with notes, I'm going to do /list view. I'm going to find that notes database there, and I'm going to do a new empty view, and I'm going to again leave that as default. List is a perfect name for this. And here, all we need to do is create that self-referential filter one more time. So adding an advanced filter. Again, you could do this as a simple filter. I prefer it as an advanced one. Project contains project template. And I'm going to get rid of this for aesthetic reasons, and that is all we need to do for the project template, except I want to go back to the projects database, and because we only have one template here, I'm going to click the three-dot menu here, and I'm going to set that as default, and I'm going to set it as default for all views in this entire database. So that means if I create a brand new project, and let's just call this Burn the Sales Song, it is automatically going to get this template. And now if I add, like write chorus, that's going to be a task that is now related to this project. Pretty cool. Okay, so we have created our projects database template. Now let's go back over and create the ones for areas and resources. And we're actually going to create two here because as you saw earlier in our example template, we have an areas template, which looks a little bit different than the resources template. Here we have the areas one, we've got projects here, we have resources, we have notes, and then we have the resources template, which is a bit simpler, just notes and web clips inside of there. So going over to our build, let's go into areas and resources, and let's go ahead and make ourselves a new template. And we're gonna start off with the resource template because it's just a little bit simpler. So with this template, we wanna set type to resource. That way, when we apply this template or when we create it in a view where we're going to make it the default, it's going to get resource by default. And then in here, we're going to do the same thing we did with projects. We're going to create our quick links area. We're going to get out of there and we're going to create two different columns. So /2c, we're going to do /1 for heading 1. I'm going to go with notes. And then I'm going to go with /1 and web clips. Once again, I'll stretch these out. This is going to look very familiar if you were paying attention during the projects build. And once again, I'm going to make a list view for my notes. I'm going to pick notes, and I'm going really fast here because I'm basically doing the exact same thing as I did in projects. I'm setting up a filtered view, advanced filter. I'm going to go with area and resource contains the resource template, and that is going to make sure only notes that are within this resource are actually going to go there. One other thing though, before I forget, is I do want to add an additional filter, and that filter is going to be archive is unchecked. So that way archived notes are not going to be in this view, and we'll also add that there. Also, because we want to split out web clips from notes, it occurs to me that I should add a filtration rule for URL is empty. So that way we are going to basically see only notes that don't have a URL. And now that I got that set up and I've hidden that database title, I can actually click this little block menu here. I can click away from it, and now it's selected. I can hit Control-C or Command-C on a Mac to copy it, and I'm just going to go ahead and paste it right here. And now I have an exact copy of this, except for I'm going to come to the filtration rules, and I'm going to change URL is not empty for the web clips view. So now I should actually see those web clips. And another thing that I want to do, and this is going to go back to that formula we added, I'm going to come into the grouping options here. And I'm going to group this view by the base URL property, which is pretty useful. And we're actually going to get rid of this one. We're going to hide it because there's always going to be a base URL. So that is our resource template. And while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to go back into our projects template because I realized that I forgot to add my archive rule here. So we're going to go with notes. We're going to say where archive is unchecked. That way, even in a project, if you archive a note, it's not going to show up in the project. And that way our archive system works everywhere as we want it to. Okay, so earlier with projects, we set our project template as default. Here, we're not going to do that with resources because we might have an area instead. So we're going to leave this at empty page, and then we could, as always, just simply apply the template that we want. But later on, when we create areas and resources linked to database views, we'll set the default templates there. For now, let's go to in the areas and resources database, that blue area one more time. We're going to do a new template, and we're going to create our area template. So I'm just going to call this area template. We'll leave this as area. And then once again, we're going to create our quick links toggle block, and we'll start creating our setup here. So /2c, 2 columns. We're going to do /1 one more time. We're going to call this area projects, and we're going to get triple dash under there. We're going to call this one area resources, triple dash under there. And I'm actually going to make the area template full width because underneath all this stuff, we're going to create a full width column, and I'm going to call this area notes. So we're going to make things a little bit different than before because we've basically just been using list views. Here, I actually like using board views for projects inside of the area and a gallery view for the resources. That way we can have these nice cover images. And then down here, we'll stick with a list view. So let's go ahead and start building that. First, let's do a board view. We're going to select projects as our source database there. We're going to do a new empty view. And by default, it groups it by tasks. I actually want to go ahead and group it by the status. That way we can actually see our projects by their status. Now, I'm super zoomed in for this tutorial so I can see what I'm doing, and so it's easy for you to see as well. Normally, you're going to be able to see all of your board groups, if there's just 3 of them on your screen, pretty easily. However, what I want to do is, again, add our filter, our self-referential filter, where area contains our area template. That way, only the projects related to this area are going to show up. And once again, we also want to add that where archive is unchecked filter. That way we can archive projects and have them get out of this area as well. One thing I'm actually going to do is come into the layout, and I'm going to set card size to small, and I'm going to set card preview to page cover. That way we get this nice look here. And then we'll move on to our area resources. So here we're going to do /gallery. I like gallery views for resources. We'll do a link to the areas and resources, new empty view. And once again, I'm going to set card size to small and card preview to page cover. We'll hit done. And just like before, we're going to add our self-referential filter. So where this time root area contains area template. So again, we're using the same database for areas and resources, and here we're showing resources. So we only want to show those that are represented by the root area that we're in. And then we're going to add our archive as well. So archive is unchecked, good to go there. And I think that is basically all we need to do for our resources section other than hiding this database title. Finally, let's create a list view. And this is going to be for our area notes. So relate that to the notes database, new empty view. I'm going to go ahead and hit done there. So that'll be good for the notes view here. Let's go ahead and filter by where the area and resource contains the area template. Once again, that is our self-referential filter. However, we're going to shake things up a little bit at this point because we also want to see notes that are contained in the resources within this area. So I'm going to go to the 3-dot menu here, and I'm going to change this into a group. It says turn into group, and that's going to let me create an OR filter here, and I'm going to select my root area rollup, and this is where that rollup comes into play. We can say where our root area rollup value contains the area template, and rollups can do that same exact self-referential filter thing where they're going to update as you apply the template. And then lastly, we're just going to add our archive is unchecked value. And also because we want to separate our web clips out, I'm going to make one more where URL is empty. And because we're creating two different tabs here, I'm going to rename this to notes. I'm going to hide that database title, and then I'm going to right click this tab and I'm going to duplicate this view, and I'll call this web clips. And here I'm going to change my filter criteria so that URL is not empty. So I actually see my URLs. I'm going to come back to the properties and I'm going to show the URL if I can find it. There it is. And then here, I want to group this view by base URL. So it looks kind of like that grouped resource view that we had earlier. If I go back to the Para dashboard, I believe it was in the Magic the Gathering. I had one web clip there. So you can see mtggoldfish.com. That's the base URL. We're grouping based on that. And if we had many clips from many websites, we'd have nice grouping there based on base URL. So I want to do the same thing here. So I'll group by base URL. I'm going to hide the no base URL option. And then in notes, one thing I forgot to do is I want to come into the grouping options there. And I want to group here by area and resource. And that way I'm actually going to see the resources that these notes are in. So that, my friends, is our area template. And with that, we have finished all of our database templates, which means we can move on to building the actual dashboard. And then once we finish the dashboard, we're also going to create our archive page, and then we'll wrap things up with a bit of aesthetic tweaking. So here we're going to once again get our handy dandy quick links block. Can't forget that. So we'll go ahead and do quick links. From there, I'm going to do a /2c for 2 columns, and I'm going to start creating the different sections of our dashboard here. So heading 1 for tasks, and I'll create my triple dash there. Another heading 1 for notes, triple dash there. And I'm going to enter down, leave 1 space or 1 block for the database. And I'm actually going to do a little trick here because I'm still, if I look, in this different column that I've made here, which means on mobile, whatever I put under here would actually come before notes. It would stack and they would stack. I don't want that. I actually want to see tasks, then notes, then projects, then areas, resources. So I'm going to do a little trick. I'm going to grab this and I'm going to drag it until I see it as a full line there. And then just for reference, I'm going to triple dash so I get a full horizontal line across the entire page. From there, I can do another /2c. And what this means is I'm now going to stack tasks, notes, big old break, projects, areas. So that's a cool little trick for when you're building your dashboards. So now I'm going to do my /1 for projects, capitalized, please and thank you. Line under there. And finally, just like hitting my mouse all over the place, areas and resources. Let's do areas ampersand resources. It's a little nicer. All right, so now we have the basic structure of our dashboard. We can actually delete this block and our column structure is going to hold as we designed it. And now we can start creating our actual linked databases. So here I'm going to utilize list views for tasks and notes. We can go back to the actual finished dashboard to reference this. So yeah, we'll use list views for tasks and notes. And I guess I called the inbox right there. I use a board view for projects and I use a gallery view for areas and resources, just like I did in the areas template. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's call this task inbox. And this is a good reminder that the inbox is a great place to quickly capture things, but then you would probably want to process the things you capture into your different para databases so that they're more organized. So here I'm going to do a /list one more time. I'm going to find that tasks database, create a new empty view. And here I want to create filter systems for an inbox view. But first let's go into properties here and let's make sure we're showing both done and due. And then I want to make sure that done is the last one we see. And I'm going to come in here and I'm once again going to show that as a checkbox instead of a select property. And I'm just showing the select property here in this video to kind of give you exposure to it. If you really only care about checkbox properties, then just use a checkbox property. Checkbox property. Yeah, use the serial property. Okay, so now we have that there. If we were to hit the little pencil icon there, we could add a due date. And now we can see that's how it's going to look. So Feb 16 is there, and then done is always on the far right side. That looks great to me. For filtration, this is an inbox view, which means we process the inbox, not always by just doing the tasks, but also by putting the tasks in the inbox into a project. So that means we want to say only show tasks in the inbox view if the project is empty. And what that means is we can start sorting our tasks into projects and they're going to get out of our inbox view. I'm also going to add another filter for where done is not in the complete area here. So I can have multiple different done statuses. I only have one, but I'm going to check complete this group entirely instead of just done here. So that's going to get rid of things that are done. And that's going to do it for the filters on our inbox view. I'm going to rename this to inbox. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this database title. And then I don't think I need a sort criteria here in inbox. I'm going to leave that as is. I'm going to duplicate this view though. And I'm going to call this one next 7 days. So this is kind of breaking out of our para tutorial here and just kind of making a more robust inbox. But I do want to have a next 7 days view where we actually get rid of that project is empty filter. And we do add a where due is on or before 1 week from now. So that way we're going to see all tasks across all projects that are coming up due in the next week, which is pretty useful to have. And because this view will show tasks that are in projects, I'm going to go into properties. I'm also going to show the project and I'm going to drag that up to the top. That way we can now see Burn the Sales Song, Feb 16. It's not done. It's going to be in this view. Last thing we're going to do, I should sort this. So let's go with do ascending for sort. Perfect. And then last thing we'll do here on task inbox is we're going to duplicate this view and I'm going to call this one completed. Now you could just have your completed tasks in the inbox, but it might be useful to have a view you can quickly switch to on your dashboard. So we'll do that. And then we'll just simply change the filters to where done is that done category there. And then we don't even need a do property. And then for done, I like to sort do as descending and we should be good there. So that's our task inbox. Let's now move on to our note inbox after we delete these defaults here. And once again, we're going to create ourselves a handy dandy list view. We're going to find that notes database there. We're going to create a new empty view. And then I'm going to go into the properties selection and I'm just going to show the URL view. So that way, if you do happen to clip something from the web and you want to click that URL, you're going to have it right there. Now in Ultimate Brain, the notes dashboard has other areas like recents and favorites. So you can keep things persistent on your notes dashboard, even if they do go into areas and resources. Here, we're simplifying everything. We're creating one dashboard for para. So we're just going to get things out of our inbox when they go into areas and resources. We're going to go ahead and hide this database title. And now let's set up our filtration. So once again, I like advanced filters. I'm going to go with where area and resource is empty. Also, where project is empty, because we can add notes to projects. That's the beauty of Notion's flexibility here. We can have project notes or area resource notes. We would like to get things out of the inbox when it goes to either one of those. And lastly, when archive is unchecked, because if we archive notes, obviously we want to get that out of every view. So that's good there. Let's go ahead and delete these. We don't need them. And that's going to be our note inbox. So now let's create our projects area. We'll do /board. We're going to find that projects database there. We're going to do new empty view. That should make it a board view. I'm going to go ahead and set the card preview to page cover. I'm going to set the card size to small. And I'm going to group this once again by the status property. So we're good there. I'll color the columns. I think that looks pretty cool. And because we have this Burn the Sales Song project, let's just go ahead and add a cover there just so we can show how it works. Cool. Let's get a better cover. I'm going to go to the unsplash option here and we'll type fire. Actually, we might get some pretty cool stuff. Yep, that's pretty cool to me. So now we have Burn the Sales Song with fire. We're all good to go there. We can move this as we want to. And let's go ahead and hide this and set up our filtration. So advanced filter. Here, the only thing we need to do is set where archive is unchecked because this is a general projects area. So it doesn't have to be related to any particular area. It just needs to be not archived. Good to go. Okay, last but not least, we'll do areas and resources. So one more time, I'm going to do a gallery view. I'm going to find that areas and resources database. I'm going to try a new empty view here. And again, the card preview, I want to set as page cover so I can see those nice pretty pictures. I'm going to set the card size to small just so I can see more at one time. And I should be good there. Now, do we have any areas or resources? No, we don't. So let's go ahead and create an area. I'll just create that as an example from the area template. Let's just call this music. I'm going to add a cover. We'll find a music cover here. And now we should see that cover, yep, on our dashboard here. So once again, filtration, we're gonna go with advanced filter. We're gonna find archive is not checked or is unchecked. And I'll go ahead and get rid of these default ones. Also within the filters here, because we're creating a view for areas and a view for resources, let's go ahead and add another filter where type is area. And these are checked by default. You cannot clear them because there's no options in there. So that's totally fine. Just make sure area is checked and resources not. I'm gonna go ahead and hide the database title here. I just think that looks better. And then I wanna rename this to areas. And I want to duplicate it, and I'll make one for resources. So this one will be called resources. And the only thing we have to do here is change the filter where type is resource instead of area. And then I alluded to this earlier, per view, we can actually set a different default template to be auto-applied when we create a new row. So here in area, I'm gonna go to the blue arrow here, and I'm going to select the area template and set it as the default. And then we get this option. Do we wanna set this as the default for all views in this entire database? No. Or do we wanna set it only on this area view? That's where we wanna set it. So I'll go ahead and do that, and we can see here that it is set as the default. And then in our resources area, or resources view, we'll go ahead and set resource template as the default only for this view. And while I'm building this, I am reminded that if we go into the area template itself, what we could do is actually set the defaults for the projects and the resources views. So I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna set resource template as the default in this gallery view here. And then I'm going to set the project template. Oh, and that's default already because we set that to default in all views. And I will note that because this is a template, when we create an instance of this template, when we create a new area, this will persist, which is a nice little feature. Okay, so now we have our dashboard created. The last big thing we have to do is create an archive page so we actually stick to that para model instead of just having pair. We want to have the A at the end. So let's go ahead and create a brand new page at the bottom here. I'm going to call this archive. And for lack of a better icon right now, I'm going to find the trash icon, even though it's not truly trashed, it's archived. And I'm going to create an empty page, and then I'm just going to put a bunch of linked databases here. So I'm going to go on down the line. I'm going to create a completed tasks section, and I'm going to do a archive notes section. And you could make these as tabs of a single linked database if you wanted to. But again, I prefer these actual sections on this purpose-made page. So I'm going to go with archived projects and archived areas and resources. And then once again, we're just going to create linked databases here. So I'm going to go with a list view of the tasks database. I'll do a new empty view. And here I'm just going to add a filter where the done status is complete. So all completed tasks are going to go to this view here. I'll hide that. That's good to go. I'm going to go to archive notes here. And you could, as always, go into your property displays and display certain properties. I'm not going to worry about that here just because we've kind of already gone over it. And you can get the template version of this if you want a super complete version, or I think you probably know enough to add it yourself. So we'll go with a notes view here, new empty view. And I'll go ahead and do a simple filter here, actually. I'm just going to go where archive is checked. So all archive notes are now going to come here. I'll hide that database title. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing here for projects and areas and resources. So here, I'll just go with the list view for the archive. We'll choose our projects database, a new empty view. And once again, filter where archive is checked, hide that database, good to go there. And then for areas and resources, I'll do a list view, and it's going to actually have two views. So we'll do areas and resources. We'll call this one areas. And here we can filter with advanced because I want to do where archive is checked and where type is area. And then I'll go ahead and hide that database title. I will duplicate this view, call this resources, and change my filter so that archive is checked and type is resource and not area. So now we have our full archive. Let's go ahead and get our quick links. Now we've got our quick links, archive is done. The last thing we really need to do here is just some optional aesthetic tweaking. So because this is a dashboard, it might get linked to every so often. I really don't want to see backlinks up here. So I'm gonna go to my 3-dot menu at the top corner. I'm gonna go to customize page, and I'm going to turn all of this stuff off or make it as minimal as it can be. Let's also go ahead and create a /2c for 2 columns right here. And I'm just gonna put databases and archive next to each other. And then I wanna go into my actual databases here and choose which properties are going to show and which are not. So let's just call this clean garage, just so we can get into a task. These, actually I wanna see all of them, so I won't customize that view. On notes, a lot of these I don't always wanna see. So I'm gonna come to customize page here, and this is going to customize all pages in this entire database. So I'm just gonna go ahead and make sure that my base URL is always hidden, the root area is always hidden, and the rest of this stuff can show. It's pretty useful. So in projects, I don't necessarily need to see the tasks area. So let's go ahead and customize and get rid of tasks. We'll do always hide since we can always see them in that linked database. We'll do the exact same thing with notes as well. We do not need it, always hide, and that's gonna look a lot better. And then with areas and resources, we'll just create a default resource, just call it MTG. And here, we are actually customizing for both the area template and the resource template. So we may want to think a little bit harder about what we want to see and what we don't want to see. We don't want to see notes. We can see that on both of those pages. We'll go ahead and always hide. We don't want to see projects because we can always see projects on the page. Same with resources. We always can see resources on the area templates. We'll always hide there. And then root area, I actually do want to leave that visible because if I'm on a resource that is contained by an area, that's going to be my short link back to that area. Now, the last thing that I want to do is actually want to come into this notebox inbox here. And I made a mistake earlier. I do actually want to show the area and resource properties. And the reason I want to show those is even if they're empty, when I click this edit button here, they're gonna show up as options. And then I can actually set my area and my resource, which will kick off my filters and will take this out of the inbox. But with area and resource in particular, I'm gonna come open up the little relation picker. I'm gonna come to this 3-dot menu here for customizing shown properties, and I'm going to show the type. And that way, if I actually pick, let's just say MTG here, if I take this filter off really quick just to show you what this is going to do, we'll just go with not empty for now. When we click into this, we're going to see that it's a resource, and we're going to see that this is an area. And this will make sorting and processing all the information that comes into your life much easier because you have a single box to click for area and resource, and then at a glance, you can just see what's a resource and what's an area. And that, my friends, is a complete tutorial on how to implement a para setup inside of Notion. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you are following along and now you have an amazing para setup inside of your own Notion workspace, and if you just watch this with popcorn or whatever your snack of choice is, hopefully you have some like cool umami stuff in that popcorn. As always, you can go into the description down below and you can get the template version of this, add it into your workspace for free. Or if you really want to upgrade your Notion workspace and build a complete productivity system inside of it, you can also get my Ultimate Brain template over at thomasjfrank.com/brain. Like I said before, Ultimate Brain has this para system in it, but it is souped up with a gigantic hot rod engine put inside of it that I took months and months to design and build. It's got a much more robust task management system with recurring tasks. We even have tutorials on how to automate those recurring tasks so they actually update themselves. There are subtasks, there's a GTD processing dashboard. There are a ton of features inside of Ultimate Brain to completely manage your entire life inside of Notion. And in addition to all those cool features, Ultimate Brain also comes with active support and a 30-day refund guarantee. So unlike a lot of other Notion templates out there, we have onboarding, we have guidance, we have tons of tutorials, we have my amazing head of support, Alex, who answers every single question. And in addition, we also have tons of members inside of our active community who are sharing their own customizations. They're helping other members out. This is not just a Notion template. It is a community that you can join, and it's a place where you can truly work on organizing your life, learning more about Notion, and leveling up your skills. So once again, go over to thomasjfrank.com/brain to check out the template, and you can use the code Let's Go 2023 at checkout to get $50 off of your purchase. Last but not least, if you are newer to Notion or you want to brush up on your Notion skills, or you're looking looking to take your Notion skills into the stratosphere and learn about advanced stuff like formulas and the Notion API, one thing I want to point out that's new on my website, thomasjfrank.com, in this Learn Notion mega menu area that my star developer Martin actually created from scratch, we have these 4 little learning tracks here. So you can go into Notion Fundamentals and you can learn everything about Notion, from the page basics to the writing system to the block basics. But we also have super in-depth, these are basically courses for free, guides on Notion databases, Notion formulas, and even Notion automation. I just recently created this automation page where I have no code tutorials, and then I also have this Notion API crash course. So if you want to get into some JavaScript coding, you want to understand how to use the Notion API, this post and the video associated with it are the way to do it. Last but not least, you can go into that same mega menu and you can go to the newsletter link right there, and that will get you onto my Notion Tips newsletter, where you'll be the first to know about new tutorials that I make, new templates that I make, and I'll send you a whole bunch of Notion goodies and reference materials that I've been building for the past few years. As always, drop your questions in the comment section down below or hit me up on Twitter. I'm Tom Frankly over there. I am very active on Twitter and I would love to hear from you. If you want to watch something else on this channel, well, first hit that like button if you enjoyed this, and then check out a couple of the cards here and here. There's probably going to be some pretty cool tutorials right there. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't already for brand new Notion tutorials coming up all the time, and I'll see you in the next one.